Hi everyone, thanks very much for coming to this session today, the community information session on COVID safe community events. I'm Julie McBride, the acting team leader of Arts, Heritage and Events, and we've put this presentation together today just to provide you with some information and give you some opportunities to have a chat with us. So I might just get started. The City of Whittlesea recognises the rich Aboriginal heritage of this country and acknowledges the Wurundjeri Willem clan as the traditional owners of this place. We also acknowledge that there might be people meeting on other people's lands, and we acknowledge those elders, past, present and emerging. And I think we'll just get straight into the session today. So what we're going to cover today is in the agenda, but just before we start on that, just to let you know that we're going to be recording this session today and sending it out for people who couldn't come to these sessions. I also like to mention that it's the first time that I've run a session like this, so if I get a little bit nervous or flustered, I apologise. And if you've got some questions, there'll be some times during the presentation, but also if you want to type them into the chat, some of my lovely assistants will be helping me with that. And another disclaimer, a council disclaimer, that what I'm saying today is accurate today, but as we know, lots of things change, and what I'm saying today is covering the current arrangements under the Stay Safe directions and the restricted activity directions of the Victorian Chief Medical Officer. But as we know, with this crazy virus, things can change. So if you're watching this recorded thing as a recording, can you please just make sure that you check in with the DHHS and the state government's website to make sure all the things that we're talking about today are still accurate. So today we're going to talk about the public events framework. So in December 2020, the state government introduced the public events framework as part of the COVID safe summer arrangements. They introduced these measures for certainty and to map a pathway back for business, events and activities that had been unable to operate during the pandemic and the lockdown and was subject to restricted activity directions like we all have been living through. Stay home, wear a mask, all of those things. But during the COVID safe summer, there's a phased resumption of public events, including attendee limits, density requirements, and which venues and places can operate. And it reflects the current conditions in Victoria and other Australian states and what national and international advice is about public mass gatherings. The COVID safe summer arrangements are broken into 3 phases, and these are going to guide how we work, how the businesses run, and also provide specific sector guidance via the workplace directions and the stay safe directions. These, like I said, were launched in the 6th of December, and there are 3 phases. Unfortunately, we've never really got out of the first phase. So even though summer's nearly over, we're still in phase 1. But what the public events framework says, and just reading from that framework, that if you're planning a public event in Victoria, it's your legal responsibility to ensure that you're designing a COVID safe event in accordance with the current public health advice. The framework has been divided into 3 tiers, and it's firstly based on the numbers. It also looks at complexity, and it measures the risks based on the 7 common factors that can increase the spread of the virus. So Numbers are important and they're the kind of break even, but then you're doing the overlay of the risk factors. So the more risks you have, the riskier your event is. The public events framework defined an event, and I'm just going to read it out even though you can see it on the screen because it is obviously the definition that we're all working off. So an organised public gathering for a common purpose which is conducted on a one-off or periodic basis, open to members of the public, publicly announced or advertised, and may be subject to specific licenses, approvals and permits. So that last part of it also means that just because you're complying with the public events framework doesn't mean that other approvals or permits that you might need from state, local or federal authorities are overruled. So in the case of the City of Whittlesea, if you wanted to use our land, council's land, you would still have to apply to get approval. So that's that type of thing. What they've also done is defined what isn't an event. And that's really useful as well, although it has created some questions, and the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions have recently clarified what isn't or is a public event, and in particular those ordinary day-to-day operations, use, activities or services. So some examples that they've given for council, for example, they said that citizenship ceremonies, which we run here at council at least monthly, are normal business activities of a local council and therefore not classed as a public event and can operate as under our normal COVID safe plans. They've said that if a market is a regular activity of the venue, it can operate in line with the workplace directions and the stay safe because it relates to retail activity. However, if the market's a one-off, like a night craft market that operates in a venue that doesn't usually run markets, then this is not day-to-day operation. So this would need a COVID safe event checklist if it was under 1,000, or an event plan if it was more than that. The other examples they've given, and that might be really relevant to some of our community groups, is a sporting club that's got a COVID safe plan for the sports activity, but then they want to do a movie night, and that activity wouldn't be considered day-to-day operations or ordinary operations. It's a one-off, and they'll need to, you'll need to do a plan for that. This is something, if you really need some kind of more information or queries about this definition, then you really should approach the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions for a ruling on that. So that's where that's at. So I'm just going to talk about the 7 risk factors as well. So we've talked about the tiers, or I'm going to talk about the tiers in a minute, but the numbers, but importantly are the risk factors. So these 7 risk factors are the ones that they've recognised as being problematic and will increase potentially the spread of the virus at an event. So indoors, unallocated seating, alcohol served at the event, not necessarily present, but served. This is my favourite: extensive singing, chanting, cheering amongst attendees during the event. And if any of you watched the tennis last night, you might have seen there was some extensive cheering going on. But kind of as a, so they're talking about choirs and I don't know, other times you might be panting or cheering. That idea that you can't maintain the 1.5 metres distance for short periods of time. Events that are held over multiple days, multiple successive days, and different attendees at each day, and attendees from interstate. So they're the 7 risk factors overlaid with the tiers and the numbers. So I'm just going to run through the tiers. So tier 1 events, these are the large events. So mainly events of 5,000 or more, or those tier 2, the 1,000 to 5,000, but with 6 or more of those risk factors that I just went through. And you will need to do a COVID safe event plan. It needs to be with the state government 8 to 10 weeks, and it has to be approved by the Public Health Advisory Panel, which includes the Chief Health Officer, and then the state government has a ministerial task force as well. So politicians making some decisions on those. Currently, under phase 1 of the Safer Summer, all of these events still have to be seated. So examples of those events, the Australian Open, A-League games, winery concerts, and all of those larger events have to publish their COVID safe online, and they're also listed, and you can see which ones have currently got approval. This system, it's only been in for 6 or 8 weeks. They're starting to approve them more quickly, but still, look, 10 weeks would be the minimum that you could say. That you'll need to be very organised for that. And currently, they're only for seated events. So if you wanted to run a big outdoor event that involves getting up and moving, then that can't happen at this stage. So tier 2, the same thing, those 1,000 to 5,000, but under no more than 5 risk factors. And again, a COVID safe event plan to the Victorian government for the approval. They're saying 4 to 6 weeks for approval. And again, these events have to be seated at this stage. The only events that can have some limited movement is these tier 3 events. So under 1,000, that it says risk factors do not apply, but a lot of the risk factors. And you must complete and submit a checklist, which is now via the online registration form to the Victorian government, which I'll go through there, and you'll need to register your event. They say that that has to be done 1 week prior to the event. Councils run a couple of events under this tier 3 using this process. So we've done our summer series, our free family movie nights that we've had running, and we're also running our community art exhibition is under that. So we've had to do our checklist, we've had to submit it and through the online process, and then they've come back to us with some requests. So one of those requests is to put our COVID safe plan up on our website as well. And so they're that's where I'm up to on the tiers. And I was wondering if there's been any questions there before I move on to my next little slides.
There aren't any questions at the moment.
Excellent. And just a reminder, if you've got them, to pop them in the chat. So that's the public events framework. It's got the tiers, it's got the 3 tiers, it's got the 3 phases, the COVID safe summer and 7 risk factors. I'm going to try to include as many numbers in my presentation. And here's the next one, which is the 6 principles of safety for COVID. So when you're planning your event, you really need to think through all of the elements of how you're physically running the event with these 6 principles of safety in mind. And I think most of us know quite a lot about that in the last year. We've learned a lot about these things, but obviously one of them, the main one, is that maintaining of physical distancing and establishing space as a barrier for airborne droplets, and keeping those physical distance between any workers and members of the public. And some of the ways that we can do that, and the ways that we've said that at council events we're going to do it, and kind of well known and things that are very common to you guys that, you know, the community's been out and about. So how are we going to keep those people apart? Will we use barriers? Will we use the floor markers as a guide? Will we use physically have security or staff to assist with that? And obviously how much room we've got at the venue is very important, and I'm going to move on to that in a little bit. The other ways we can deal with that is, you know, that idea that we could implement, you know, the one way in and the one way out. So when you're looking at your event, look at where those kind of the pinch points are going to be, and see what you can design around that. What we've also been using is sneeze guards, kind of barriers that you've seen at any shopping centre that you've been to. And the other thing we had to think about is, what are we going to do if someone refuses to comply with us? So at council events we use security and staff to make that happen, but that's something I think you'll need to consider. That idea that we'll need to limit the number of people in any enclosed area. And when you're designing the work, can it be done side by side instead of facing each other? And also consider when people are having breaks, so that minimising that time that people are together and need to be in close proximity to each other. One of the things obviously is how many people can be in a venue. So we've been using outside venues, and while currently if you're using an outside venue it's 1 person per 2 square metres, that is if you are using electronic QR coding, and that people are mainly seated under the tier 3. If you can't guarantee, or you're not using the electronic QR code, then you'll have to go to the 4 square metres. And just some examples of how you determine that, and the example on at the bottom of the screen about how you could physically position 4 people within that space. Some businesses don't have to count the workers when you're determining capacity and quotients of your at your venue. So, for example, restaurants, pubs, bars, cafes, food courts and nightclubs, those workers are not included in the capacity of the venue. Same is with cinemas and casinos and galleries and museums. So there's a whole range of places where those people aren't counted, and there are places, times when they are counted. So depending on your venue, you need to look at the size of your venue and then work out from that how many people can physically fit. When council was first planning their events, we looked at our events at the 4 square metres, just in an abundance of caution. We could have gone to 2 square metres, but we just thought, yeah, we'll give everyone some more space, and that's worked out quite well. So the next principle, I think we're all well and truly over now, is face masks. So the Chief Officer's directions and the restricted activity directions are that all people must carry a mask and use it when physical distancing can't be guaranteed or can't occur. So we've said for our events that having a mask is a condition of entry, not wearing it, but having it. We make masks available for staff, contractors, participants and the general public. We also have provided information to our staff and our contractors about how to use a mask properly. But we've done training on why there are certain exemptions, obviously, for wearing a mask. And we've also got a process that if people refuse after repeated requests, that we might have to ask them to leave. But in the end, wearing a mask is a personal responsibility. And as you as organisers can do everything in your power, make it a condition of entry, tell the people again and again, give them the spare masks and do all those things. But in the end, it is their responsibility. So it's a kind of a hard one to manage, but obviously they don't have to wear masks outside. So, you know, we've moved on a little bit. I think we also know this about the practicing good hygiene. You will need to have some cleaners and a cleaning schedule for your event. You will need to have a look and find out or identify those high touch surfaces. So it might be at the venue, there's one place that everyone goes in and touches, maybe down some stairs. So look at those type of places where you're going to make sure that you're cleaning them regularly. You need to provide PPE for the people who are cleaning those surfaces. So do have lots of, and when I say PPE, I mean personal protective equipment. So gloves for someone who's doing the cleaning. Make sure that there's plenty of soap and sanitizers around, and that the cleaners have access to proper disinfectant. We also putting up signage that is freely available, promoting hand hygiene and other public health messages is also really important. And then obviously the sanitizer stations where you're going in, so entry and exit, around the toilets, around food vans or other activities. The next one of those 6 principles is records and illness. And you'll need to keep a record of anyone who's worked and volunteered or attended your event. You must keep those records for 28 days. You must keep them in line with the privacy policies. And what we've done at our events, we've been using the state government's QR code system. That way, they'll register, you know, the QR codes are very useful at the moment. This state government one is free. You register, you tell them when your event is, and they will send you an email and a poster that's got your own QR code, and they will retain that register for 28 days on your behalf. That way everyone's records are there. They're only to be used for contact tracing, and during our event season so far, we have used those. We've used a booking system, so we also had a booking system for tickets, and that also kept a register as well. So the other thing that you really need to record is that everyone said that they were well at the event or prior to the event, to coming to the event, and you need to keep that register as well. So anyone who's worked there, anyone who's volunteered there, and anyone who's attended, and that's your duty as well. That's been quite difficult in an event context, and so council has gone to events that are fenced, because that seems to be the only way that we can really know who's attended our venues, and that we can fulfill our duty to keep those records for 28 days. So it's a little bit, it is what it is. That is your duty. Duty sounds like anyway, sounds a bit strange, but that's our obligation. So you'll need to think about, when you're running an event, how you can do that, and how can you have records of everyone who attended. So if it's contractors, potentially you can push that back and say they'll provide you with all the information, but how are you keeping your numbers and your records of everyone who's there? The next one in the 6 principles is indoor interaction. So anytime that you've got people indoors, you have a higher risk, and you need to manage it so while your event might be outside, just think about any time that you might need to go indoors during breaks, or there might be one part of your event that's indoors. So just the idea that any time inside is going to be more risky than outside, and trying to minimise that time spent indoors to 15 minutes. Try to keep those people, especially I'm thinking like if you've got an outdoor event but people are going inside to have a break or to have their lunch. So think about how you're going to manage that. And again, that side-by-side work. They also the government talked about outdoor marquees and outdoor marquees, and they have said that an outdoor marquee is not indoors. It is counted as outdoors, even if it's got 3 walls. So like a normal stall at a market or something. So that is considered outdoors. This, the 6th final one, probably doesn't necessarily relate to all of the community that might be here today, but that idea that what we don't want is kind of the whole team being knocked out if someone got sick or had to go into a quarantine. So trying to keep pools of workers or volunteers together, so that if something happened, we're minimising who else would have to go into quarantine or lockdown or something like that. And just try to think about those any of those times that people are interacting and then kind of coming apart. So they're the 6 principles of COVID. And now, is there any questions now?
Yeah, we have some questions. The first question is, how and where is regular cleaning of high contact points defined? Can you publish a link, please?
No, I cannot publish a link. You will need to go to the DHHS website and potentially inquire there. It is deliberately, I think, it's my personal opinion, it's a little bit fluid and it kind of depends on what your numbers are. At my workplace, they're cleaning every 4 hours. I think it definitely depends on your venue and your throughput. So if you had 500 people, but almost everyone had to touch it, I think that's a very high contact point. But depending on, so if the question was about those definitions, I'm going to refer you to the DHHS website. And again, we'll put that up there. Was that the whole of the question, Nicola, or did I just only answer one part of it?
No, it was, how and where is regular cleaning of high contact points defined? Yeah, I think you've answered it. There is another question about cleaning. Is regular cleaning defined for the high touch points?
Again, that I don't think it is. I haven't seen it as such, but like I said, we can refer you to the DHHS and potentially send round a link later on as well.
We had another question. Can not-for-profit organisations use the Vic government QR system?
Every single people can use the QR system. It's free and council is using it at our events. Part of the reason we were using it is it's a free system and it comes with a whole lot of these other resources. Like I said, the posters to sign in with the QR forms, and also when you as a user go to something, if they're using that one, it self-fills all of the categories of things. So if you've used it a lot, it's a kind of a quick and easy process. So yes, free, anyone can use it, everyone should use it.
Is that found on the DHHS website?
No, it's at the state government, but I'll go through that in the resources slide that's coming up.
Okay, we've got more questions. Is a footy club or cricket club ground or club rooms a private or public space, or is it deemed by what the function is, like regular business versus movie nights?
Yeah, exactly what you're doing. So the cricket clubs got a COVID safe plan to play cricket, potentially even having training, etc. But the moment the cricket club goes to run a movie night, you'll need to register that as a public event as well. So definitely.
Okay. And another question, does open to the public include club members or only the wider public?
So I knew we'd get quite a lot of questions about this definition, and I think in some ways it's a case by case. If the club is running normal club activities, say you're a gardening club and on the Wednesday you were meeting for your regular gardening things, your event, your workshop or your actual gardening, then that's normal day-to-day operations. Even some guest speakers might almost be included if that was something that you regularly did. If you always had monthly sessions, then, you know, that's normal day-to-day. Certainly, members of clubs doesn't trigger public to me, but if you're doing different things than normal day-to-day operations, and not dissimilar to the first question, I think they've kind of kept it a little bit fluid because every case depends. It's kind of like events, isn't it? You know, generally in that there's events and then there's events. They're all a little bit different and it all does depend. So cricket club running cricket, absolutely normal business. Cricket club running a movie night or some type of fundraising thing, then I think you should apply through the public events framework. I've just got a couple more slides and I might go on to them and then we'll go back if there's any other questions as well. So we discussed the 3 different tiers, and tier 3, which is under 1,000, and I think probably most likely that our community will be running events that are that. Just need to do the checklist as part of your registration. But if you're running a bigger event, these are another set of numbers that you would need to deal with. So these are for tier 2 and tier 1 events, excuse me. So again, 5 areas to address, and I'm just going to really talk about them a little bit and not go into them in depth because these are for big events, yeah, over 1,000, but I think it's kind of useful to see what they're looking for. So in this way, unlike your smaller plans, which we're addressing the 6 principles of COVID and how we're going to deal with that, the bigger events are really looking for before, during and after processes. So in the oversight and administration, they're looking for what structures and governance and ways that you're and processes that you're planning and delivering your events. They're looking at how workers and attendees have received information and what messaging you've provided them, what strategies you've got for record keeping, and how you're going to manage that. For attendee management, they're looking at your physical distance strategies, how they're looking after the people who've got symptoms of COVID even during the event, how you're managing that, how those commingling and concentrated congregation areas are going to be looked at. The cleaning and hygiene, they're looking at training, scheduling, identification of those high touch objects and areas, and what type of, are the provisions of hand washing and hand sanitizing suitable and adequate. They're looking at how you're going to manage your workers, your vendors, your contractors, your volunteers, how you've trained them, what information you've got, and then looking at those operational spaces. So what are you dealing and looking after, in those different areas, from your stages to your retail areas to your toilets to your facilities. So I'm not going to go into that too much, but the difference between those smaller events and this bigger event and the COVID safe event plan, they're those type of things that you're going to have to look at, and it's before, during and after. So the next and my last slide is just around resources. So the state government has got a lot of information on those websites. So the coronavirus.vic.gov.au is the website that you need to keep going back to. You can go into the public events and the information for organisers. On that site, you can access the QR code and the information, posters to put up, sign-in sheets, a whole range of things. So I might leave that there and send out, maybe the links can go up on the website, but get on and drill down and have a look around those websites and really explore. And if you've got some extra questions, please come and, well, we can have a time now. Otherwise, we're happy to send this recording out or answer some other questions. Do we have any questions, Nicola?
Nothing new.
Okay. That's about all I've got.
Well, actually, there is one question that you might want to answer. So if a community member, like an individual who's not part of a community group, organises a public event such as a one-off cleanup day, do they still need to complete the Tier 3 checklist?
So if it was a public event, if they were inviting other people to come and do that event, then I would say yes, they definitely do. If it's members or wanting to go out and do an activity together, then you're working under, then no, it's not a public event. It's a members only event and going out. You would still need to operate under a COVID safe plan if you're a business, say, or a place of worship. You might already have that in place, but you're not inviting, if it was a Clean Up Australia Day, then yes, you're inviting general public to come to a certain place, then yes, you would need to, that would be a public event.
Next question is, how often do we have to clean the toilets?
Well, if you're at my house, regularly is what it says. So, and it kind of depends, not after every use or whatever, but what's reasonable. So I suppose if you're having an event that runs for 4 hours, the toilet should be disinfected when you start. They should be cleaned potentially halfway through and again disinfected at the end. It also kind of depends on, you know, do you have a hand sanitizer station before people are going in? Have you got those messages up about keeping clean and the good hygiene? Because those type of things mitigate the risk of transfer during going to the toilet.
That's all the questions we have.
Okay. Then I'd like to thank you all for coming. I really hope it's been useful. We really wanted to encourage community groups to try to start reconnecting or doing new events. This was at no means trying to scare you. They're very doable and reasonable things and concepts. I think they're definitely new and they're a little bit, they take some thinking through, but we wanted people to really get some information and hope that that would be useful to them, because we really want the community to reconnect, and if we can assist you with that and more advice, other sessions coming forward. Like I said though, the issue is the COVID changes all the time, so please check back into those websites, coronavirus.vic.gov.au and the DHHS website, which is dhhs.vic.gov.au/coronavirus. Or if you use your search engine and just do public events framework. There's a lot of information and resources there. So I'd like to thank you all for coming.